Okay, prior to removing the transmission, the bell housing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove that inspection plate because I believe you're going to have to move that in order to get the bell housing off. And after I take that inspection plate off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to support the engine. All right, you see the engine block here. I'm going to put a piece of wood over there, and then I have this jack right here just to keep it from falling down. I don't want that motor to slip down and do something with the mounts or anything like that. So I'm going to use that. I'm going to put a piece of wood up there. I'm going to support that motor to make sure nothing happens. Okay, to remove the transmission cross member, you're going to have 13 and 15 millimeter bolts. These on the outside are 13. The ones on the center are 15 millimeter bolts. You'll loosen those up, then you can drop the transmission. As you can see, you have all the transmission bolts all coming out. I'll need to get a rubber cap to stop that transmission fluid from coming out. Obviously, I have it kind of taped up, but that's not necessarily working too well. So don't use my example here in regards to stopping that oil leak. I'll probably have to go home and get myself a rubber cap to prevent it from leaking. Same thing with the hydraulic release bearing, the HRB. Put a rubber cap over that to keep it from leaking down, or you'll be picking up a mess later. Okay, Hellcat owners, just to touch base with you again, before you can pull out the transmission, not only do you have to take out the shift linkage, you're going to have to actually remove the actual shifter itself, the forks. At least if you have a Barton shifter, you will. It's because those big long forks will not clear the transmission as you try to pull it out. I kind of learned the hard way, but if you do have an aftermarket shifter, you're going to have to pull the shifter out, pull the console out, pull everything out in order for you to actually get that transmission out, because those forks will not give enough room for that transmission to drop down or move back. So learn the hard way. If you want to know how to take apart your console, look at my video about 6 months ago. I'll show you how to do that. It's fairly easy. Some clips, a couple screws, console's out. Shift is a little bit more difficult, but not that difficult. Anyways, got it out. I'm ready to take out the transmission now, and shifter's out. Everything should be clear. Transmission's coming out. Okay, once you have the shifter out, you have all the transmission bolts out, you can kind of see how it all comes apart. You have the HRB right there that has to come off. You have the dowels. You have those two bolts on top that I was talking about earlier that are tough to get. You see on top, you're going to have to use that long extension to get those bolts out. Once you have those out, you can see this is a long shaft. This long shaft will be the reason why you need to buy that tool, so you can get that clutch lined properly, especially if you're going with an aftermarket clutch like Bad Boys, because it has twin disc and you want to make sure everything's lined up. Here is the other side, the pressure plate. I have the bell housing. I'll take that off next, and we'll see how that comes apart. It shouldn't be that difficult. Here's the condition of it right now. It doesn't look too bad right here. Once I take that pressure plate off, we'll see what has happened. The clutch was making a bunch of groaning noises. Wasn't necessarily slipping too bad, but I suspect that there's going to be an issue with it once I take it off. So there you go. The transmission's all it's basically on this jack. It's secured. I'm going to have a buddy help me actually take it off the jack, and we'll start pulling out the clutch. Okay, in order to get the bell housing off, what you need to do is you have to remove the bell housing bolts. The bell housing bolts consist of 15 millimeter bolts, as well as 14 millimeter bolts that are actually on top. You can see them up on top there. A little bit of a bear to get off. The 15 millimeters are pretty easy. You have the two on the bottom, and then you have the ones going from the back side. They are different sizes. You'll see as they go in actually through here. You'll see right here something like over here, and you have them on both sides as well as the top. So you have 4 of those, you have 2 on the bottom, and then you have those 14 millimeters sitting on top that you're gonna have to pull off or get this bell housing off. All right, gonna finish that up and we're gonna pull it off. Okay, the bell housing is off. You can see what bolts go where. You'll see that these bolts right here, these top bolts are probably the hardest bolts so far to take off on this whole job. They're in there pretty tight. I have Loctite on them, and they have an actual there's a bracket up on top that's holding a harness, and you have to move that bracket out of the way so you can get to those bolts, just because you have another bolt that goes on top of here, which is a 14 millimeters, so you have to take those off before you can get to those bolts. These down here, they're reverse bolts over here. You'll see over here they come in through here like this on about 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, and on this side there's a 4th one, and then you get the 2 long bolts over here. So I'm going to bring you over, show you what it looks like with the bell housing off. Okay, on top you'll see, up on top you'll see a bracket up here that I was talking about that's very, very hard to get out of the way. You see that bracket right there? You have to move that out of the way in order to get that bell housing off. And you have the harness that's hooked up to it. So you either disconnect the harness, or you can kind of push it up out of the way so you can get those 14 millimeters out. And then you just jiggle this thing out, and here you go. Now my next problem is getting that pressure plate off, and you can see you need a couple special sockets in order to get that off. So I'll get the special sockets and I'll take it off. Okay, the pressure plate is off. In order to get these torque spits, reverse torque bits off, you're going to need yourself a E12 torque spit. Okay, E12 torque spit. They're a 5-point torque spit. So in order to get that off, you'll have to get that. So as you can see, there's some blue Loctite on there. So when you do put it back together, make sure that you have some Loctite so it doesn't back off on you. So here's the clutch assembly. I pulled out the clutch assembly, and it doesn't look too bad, but you do see when I bring it back here, you got some heat situation going on here. It looks like it's been a little bit hot, might have been slipping a little bit. Maybe that's where the noise is coming from. Obviously the disc isn't in too bad of shape, so like I said, you know, it wasn't slipping in gears, it was just slipping when I dropped the clutch and I wanted to take off from a light really quick. It would groan and make some noise. It might have slipped a little bit, but it sure wasn't kind to me, so this is why I've gone ahead and decided to replace the clutch. So let's go look at the flywheel so you can kind of see what the flywheel looks like. So come back up here, and here's the flywheel. I'm going to put a little light on this situation, and you can see you got some heat situations going up on top there, maybe a little chatter action or something, but definitely time for me to change the clutch. I know there's only 12,000 miles on it, but I think Dodge probably could have done a better job with the clutch. Being 700 horsepower, 6-speed, you could probably imagine that there's going to be quite a few clutches that are going to be replaced in this. So let me take the flywheel off, and we're going to start putting things back together. All right, people, now that I have the transmission out, I have the clutch out, I have the pressure plate out, and I have the flywheel off, I'm just going to go over to the HRB. We're going to start replacing some parts. So the HRB is pretty simple. Got two 13 millimeters over here. They're not on very tight. 3/8 inch drive. Pull it out. Just slide it off just like that, and you're ready for your new HRB. Bad Boys supplies a bleeding type of HRB, so there's going to be 2 outlets. So you're going to have to run these actual lines up the cowl so you can actually properly bleed the HRB. Here we are. I have the new flywheel on. This is the Bad Boys Garage flywheel. Toddy had sent it over to me. He makes it fairly easy to actually put on. Obviously, you kind of know what you have to know what you're doing. But here we go. This is I'm going to try to explain this to you guys. Okay, the brand new flywheel. It's all built aluminum. I did a really nice job putting it together. Now you see the flywheel bolts. They're AARP or ARP bolts, and they're a really good set of bolts. You can see that there's a pattern there. So it's a cross pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now what you have to do is you have to actually seat this flywheel before you actually torque it down. You seat it, then you put your Loctite on it, and then you can move forward with the rest of the assembly. So you can see how he's kind of numbered it there. I'm going to clean this off a little bit. Looks like it's a little dirty before I even move forward, but that's just after I put it on there. Again, the flywheel goes on only one way. It looks like the bolt pattern is actually correct, but once you get a flywheel, you'll notice that it will go on only one way. So if you're going to actually put this together, don't get scared. Okay, I got this all torqued down. I used red Loctite, went into star pattern, torqued this down to 65 foot-pounds as per Toddy's instructions. Everything looks good. It's ready to go. I'm about to put the first part of the clutch on. So let's take a look at what that's going to look like. And once we put that first part down, we'll torque that down, and then we'll put the second part on. and then we'll get ready to put this transmission on. We are at the transmission side now. I put that first disc on. As you can see, I have the dummy shaft. Now, I would never recommend this job without using that proper dummy shaft from Chrysler. It's a Miller tool. You could order it online from Chrysler. It's about 180 bucks, but definitely worth it if you want to line this tool right. So here I got the tool in, put a little bit of lithium grease on the bearing, slid it in, got the first portion on. Now I'm going to put the second portion on and get everything back together. Okay, if you are putting a twin disc setup on your Hellcat, you're going to have a twin disc or two disc to put on. So I had put the floater plate on, torque goes down, the floater plate goes in between the first disc and the second disc. You'll need to torque that down to 24 foot-pounds, and then once you do that, you can put on your second disc. I just put on my second disc, and now I'm ready to put on the pressure plate. So once the pressure plate goes on, I'll torque that down in a star pattern, and little by little, so I'll seat it properly. Star pattern. Just a little note, back on the flywheel, to seat it, you're actually going to have to work that star pattern quite a few times before you actually seat the flywheel. So just don't crank down on it in a star pattern and think you're going to do it in one round. I think I went through maybe about 4 or 5 rounds just to make sure that I got it seated properly. Okay, the pressure plate is on. I have torqued the pressure plate at 38 foot-pounds in the star pattern, starting from the lower right. Now I have the dummy shaft in. There's a little tech tip here. When you get the dummy shaft in, and after you torque it, you need to be able to pull that out without too much of a problem. So you just kind of rotate this out. Actually, just basically, you see how it just kind of comes in and out pretty easy. So you don't want it to be stuck. If it's stuck, you know you're not going to get that transmission shaft back in. So that's a little tech tip for you. Everything seems to be going smoothly now that the pressure plate's on. I'm ready to put in the transmission. Ready to go. The HRB's installed. You can see that the lines, you got one coming up on top and one coming up at the bottom. Toddy does mark them for you, 1 and 2. The 1 goes to the top portion, or the 2 o'clock, and the 2 goes to the 3 o'clock position. So with that said, I am going to get this ready to actually put on the jack and install the transmission along with the bell housing. So there you go. This is how you get the HRB on. Bell housing goes on next, and then transmission goes in. Okay guys, I have the bell housing put back on. You have to make sure that you get all the correct bolts in there. The bottom ones are the 2 long ones. You have the 3 top bolts up there, or 4 top bolts that are kind of stud-like, 14 millimeters. Don't forget the ground cable up in the right-hand corner there on the passenger side. You need to make sure you get that. Also, you have the plate on top. Kind of hard to see from here, but you can see that there's a little black plate. Screw those down. And torque those down according to specs. So the bell housing's on. I think I'm going to go ahead and put the starter in just to make sure that everything looks good with the starter. I'm going to put that in. It doesn't look like it's really going to be an issue later on. So the plugs and everything are right there. It's kind of easy to do right now, so I figure I'll do that right now before I put the transmission in.